Hi guys, Tracy here with a special video today for National Scrapbooking Day. Today I am participating in a video hop here on YouTube, so make sure after you're finished watching this video that you check out the information section for this video. You will have to click on the More Info tab or whatever it says on your device to reveal the links to all of the other YouTubers who are participating in this video hop. So I hope you guys are all having a really great National Scrapbooking Day. And so I'm going to just talk about this video hop and the things that I am trying to accomplish in this video. So I have a couple pictures picked out that I'm going to scrapbook with, and I will tell you about those in a minute. But basically the three challenges for this video hop were to 1, try something new, 2, use one or more products that you love, including kits, and 3, scrapbook about change or evolution in your life. And for this layout, I'm going to be, I guess, using a theme, both for the topic as well as for how I'm going to scrapbook this. And my theme is the kind of change that I'm going to talk about is getting back into something that I've put aside for a while. So once we started having kids, our lives obviously changed in a pretty significant way. And before we had kids, we used to do quite a lot of hiking and, you know, in the woods on trails and things like that. And it's just hard to get a stroller in there. And then it seems like after our kids were out of strollers, they were on bikes, and bikes can't really go on trails when you're a kid in the same way that they can when you're an adult. And so we've sort of been putting our hiking passion on hold for a little bit. But our kids are older now. They're 9, well, they're almost 8 and 7, almost 9 and 7. And they're definitely, I mean, it's been a couple years that they've been able to go hiking, but now they're really quite competent and they can go hiking with us. And also we just have more free time because they're involved in activities where we can go and drop them off, and then Scott and I could go for a hike and then come back and get them at the end of their activity. So anyways, we love the woods and we're hoping to pass that love on to our kids as well. So we've been doing some family geocaching. We've been going for hikes when our kids are at activities. And so I just wanted to kind of capture that. So in line with that kind of idea of getting back to something you love, I'm also going to be scrapbooking under the try something new. It's something new for lately for me. So the something new is that I'm going to scrapbook without a kit today. So I know, right? It's very strange. I almost always use kits. And there's a reason for that. It's because I get the kits every month. Like belonging to a kit club, you get a bunch of goodies every month. And so you might as well use them, right? And I find that for the amount of scrapbooking I do, which is about somewhere between 4 and 8 layouts a month. So I always do at least 4, but sometimes I don't do many more than 4, but the most that I would ever do in a month would be 8. And so with the amount of scrapbooking that I do, all of my needs are met by my kits. And so that's why I don't do a ton of shopping. You don't see a lot of hauls on this channel. And I mean, occasionally I'll buy something just because I love it. I really don't need to buy stuff at this point, so I try really, really hard not to. But I do have a pretty significant stash because before I belonged to kit clubs, I was buying stuff, you know, like we all do. And so I do have a pretty significant stash. And then also every month there are leftovers from my kits. Like if it's a month where I've only done 4 layouts, I might have a ton of leftovers and they're all going back into my stash. And my idea of keeping my stash instead of, you know, getting rid of it all at the end of the month is that there might be a time when I don't belong to a kit club anymore. And so and plus I do like to have a stash to draw upon in case there's a month where the kit doesn't have exactly the color that I need or the letters that I need. And that sort of thing. And also there are times when I just want to put the kit aside and do something else. And so that's what I'm going to do today. I'm putting my kit aside. It's not quite killed, but I don't think I'm going to get another layout out of it just because my new kit is going to arrive any day. I'm hoping it comes today so I can do my video about it today. I am going to scrapbook. My try something new is kind of something new and old. So I'm returning to something old, which is scrapbooking without a kit. That's my try something new. I'm going to use lots of products that I love, and you'll see those as I go. And the change that I'm talking about is our kind of shift towards trying to get back to nature in our family. So I'm going to put you on fast forward and show you my process, which will be a little bit different today because instead of going through the kit, I'm going to go through some of my supplies. So the earlier part of this process video might be a little bit longer because it does take longer to sift through my whole stash as opposed to just a tray of selected supplies. So we'll get started with that. So come along, and I hope you have a great time watching. Okay, so these are the photos I'm going to be scrapbooking today. I have a 4x6 and two 2x2 Instagrams. And that 4x6 was taken by my husband. And here I have a selection of papers in my recent buys category. You can check out my blog or my channel for a video that shows you how I store my paper. And in that I show you how I do keep my recent buys. And some of these are quite old, like those of you who shop more often than I do will probably not find these to be new things, but they are relatively recent, meaning probably within the past 6 months. So I just pulled out a selection there that I thought I might use. And now I'm just looking through my Studio Calico papers. I have them divided by, all of my paper collections are divided by tabs. And I have multiple Studio Calico collection papers here that I am looking through. And I'm just looking for some patterns that have some greens and blues and I guess some nature. I'm not really looking for themed, but I'm looking for some natural or organic looking papers that might have elements of nature in them. So I pulled out that robin paper from the Maggie Holmes collection and a whole bunch of other things from the Maggie Holmes collection. Now I'm just looking under my black tab and for some black paper, and I couldn't find the one that I wanted, and so a paper that I wanted. So I went into my black scraps, and this is my drawer where I keep black and white and gray scraps, and I'm just looking for some dark neutrals that might be able to ground some of the other patterns or the photos that I'm going to be using. And so here's what I ended up coming up with. It's all kind of thrown on my floor until I gather it up, and I'm just going to add it to what I have here. And a couple of those Studio Calico papers, a basic gray paper, some My Mind's Eye, that one is crepe paper, and then I've got some scraps. I don't know where those are from. And then that blue polka dot one is from Maggie Holmes. And so now I have a collection of papers that I'm going to use as my darks, and these will be used to anchor things on my layout. And now I'm just kind of going through. I might use some of these embellishments. I'm going to pull out any potential embellishments and just adding that black one to my darks. And now these ones are not going to work, and so I'm kind of gesturing to you there that I'm not going to use that one. Not going to use that one either. And I might use that transparency one. So these are my rejects, which is a little harsh, but these are the papers that I won't be using this time around. So that's these ones. I'm just going to put them aside, and then I have a bunch of patterns here, and then these are going to be my light colored neutrals, and I'm going to use these potentially for layering. So that's what these next papers are. There's a Maggie Holmes and a crepe paper there from the Pier. And then what's left over are my patterns. So it's sort of how I chunk my papers as I work when I'm not using a kit. And that second to last one there, I'm not sure that I'm going to use. I'm pretty sure I won't, but I'm going to keep it out anyways. And then these are some other things that I might use on this layout. Not going to use that silver because I'm going to go for gold highlights or gold accents, I guess, instead of silver. So I pulled out some other tissue paper that was more in the color scheme that I'm looking for. I also pulled out a piece of vellum and those butterflies. Not sure if I'm going to use that overhead transparency. It's not an overhead transparency, but you know what I mean, a transparency. And now what am I doing? Oh yeah, I just wanted to show you that I'm just laying these all out in categories on my desk. And so I just wanted to show you that they're all over there on the sidelines for me to draw from as I create this layout. So now I'm trying to decide on which of these two will be the background, if I'm going to go with the wood grain that's a blue color, or if I'm going to put the photos on this paper from the pier, which is from crepe paper. And so yeah, I'm just kind of fiddling around with how the photos are going to go. I want the two smaller photos to go before the bigger photo because they sort of tell the story of getting to the place where the waterfalls were, and they kind of came before. So I'm just going to use this paper from the pier, which is from crepe paper, to mat those photos. And now I'm going to pull out some of these crepe paper frames. They're also from the pier collection. Sorry about my head here. My camera was set up in a funny direction for this layout. So I'm just kind of experimenting with how I might be able to use some of these frames. I love those chipboard frames, and had a last moment change of heart and just decided I might change my mind a couple of times. So I'm just going to pull them all out of the two sizes that I'm using. So I've got the medium size and the small size. And I'm going to go with mostly neutrals for those frames. I'm going to use some temporary adhesive here just to put them in place so that I can cut my paper and decide on some things, but still not have fully committed to the layout being what it is. I mean, I've committed to the photos being where they're at, but I might change around how I have the frames. One of the benefits of using this paper trimmer, which is a Caterpillar Pro, whoops, turned off my lights there for a second, sorry about that, is that you can cut things that have dimensions. So even though those chipboard frames are on my layout, I can still use the trimmer and it doesn't create any problems for me. So now I'm just moving that frame over a little bit because you'll see that the one over on the right, the one that's half yellow and half white, is hanging off the page a little bit, and I don't want it to look odd, so I'm just going to make the other one hang off the page a little bit so it's more part of the design. And the reason that the yellow one is overhanging is that I just didn't know I was going to use it until I had already put it in place. So this is a paper from Webster's Pages, this background paper, and I really love it. So I really wanted to make sure I used it. It's perfect for one of these nature layouts. And I definitely want to use that beautiful, beautiful robin paper. And I definitely want to use that red paper as well. So thinking about using the robin paper here inside of one of these chipboard frames like this. And then using the red paper is from Studio Calico, it's from the Snippets collection. Not going to use that one. So I'm just going to trim this up a little bit, like that. And now I was going to use it like this, but then I decided I think I'm going to put a banner tail at the bottom. And at this point I was thinking I might do some sewing down the middle, so I decided to fold it and make it look a little crumpled so that I could maybe do some sewing down the folded line, but I'm not going to end up doing that after all. I'm just layering some vellum here to try to decide what I'm going to do with the vellum. I definitely want to use it. And I definitely want to use it with this awesome embossing folder. So I'm just cutting off a piece so that I can emboss it. I'm going to go grab my Big Shot. And I'm just going to emboss it using tab 2 of my Big Shot platform, and that is going to emboss it really, really deeply, and so much that it's torn a little bit. And I had an idea. It's kind of like one of those happy accidents where I'm kind of like, oh, maybe I could just use these, and I wasn't sure how much I could kind of force them out with my hand versus having to cut around them. So I just experimented with pulling some of them apart. And now I'm going to emboss a second piece of vellum. And this time I think I used tab 1, so that was a little bit less pressure. And it embossed it very nicely without cutting any of the edges. So that's what I wanted for this piece of vellum originally. So I'm going to go and trim that down. And I'm going to cut it in half so that I can use some of it at the top and some of it at the bottom. And of course, your eye is going to think that it's one big long piece of vellum, but of course we all know that it isn't. And I'm going to adhere that to the red pattern paper from Studio Calico that I have cut into a banner shape. And I'm just layering it so that it hangs over on one side so that you can see some of the red paper on the other side. And here I'm going to figure out what I might want to do with some of these little pieces of doilies that came apart when I embossed it a little bit too hard. And it just gave me a great opportunity to have a embellishment that is not going to, I love vellum embellishments because it doesn't take away from some of the other patterns that are already on the paper. So I'm really excited to use those as embellishments on this page. I'm going to put away that polka dot paper because it's just not going to have a good use for this particular layout. And now I would love to be able to frame this whole white or cream colored piece of pattern paper from the pier with this other piece of crepe paper, but it's not quite long enough to do that. But I'm going to show you a little thing that you can do when you don't have quite enough paper. So I wish that this was big enough to mat, but it just isn't, and I don't want it to be. You could always just make it be like a drop shadow type of thing where it's gonna kind of go over and it's gonna cover kind of like two sides, or it's gonna stick out on two sides and then be covered on two sides. But I didn't want to do the drop box look, the drop shadow look either. Blah, I'm having trouble getting this out. So what I'm going to do instead is I just went over to my black paper scraps looking for some scraps, but I happen to know that the paper on the other side of this paper coordinates quite nicely with this paper. I'm going to think about maybe using another, but really this is the paper that I want to use here. So I am going to, it's not exactly the same color, it's just slightly darker, and it has a similar type of a pattern. So I'm pleased with the way these two look together. So where the gap is, where that paper isn't quite long enough to reach, I'm going to put this punched border. And you're not going to see much of this border, so I'm just going to, because it's not wide enough, I'm just going to take two and glue them together. And I glued them together a little bit wrong. And wrong again. So yes, it's going to take me a little bit to figure this one out because I want it to be wider than the paper below, but I also want it to end on, like, not exactly on one of the scallops. So now I'm just going to clean up that bottom edge because it's not quite straight. So I just use my trimmer to do that. And that is the way I would like it to look. So that is perfect. Except, of course, I'm going to make this scallop be on the bottom because it is a darker color. So I like my darker colors to be towards the bottom of the layout. So that's the way I'm going to layer that. And all that does is it sort of extends the dark border around the outside of that cream colored mat. And it doesn't make it so obvious that I ran out of paper. So I'm definitely going to use this robin die cut, but I don't want to pair the robin die cut with the robin paper because that would just be too much. So instead I'm going to shift the robin paper over to the side here. I don't know what I did wrong with my tripod this time, but my head is in this layout all over the place, so my apologies for that. I'm having a look at the Maggie Holmes die cuts just to see what else I might want to do. Thought about using this little ticket here. It's got a phrase on it. I can't remember what it is because I didn't end up using it, but it has a phrase that I thought was appropriate. And then that beautiful large ampersand is going to make a great embellishment for this one too, but I don't like how you can see so much going on in the negative space of it. It's kind of distracting. So I'm going to put this vellum doily behind it just to, you can still see through it, but it's just a little bit less bold and busy, and it kind of, I don't know, it just makes it look a little bit less distracting. I thought about sticking a doily under there and just kind of experimented with how that would look behind the ampersand, kind of sticking out from the very bottom layer, but I'm not going to do that. Aw, sorry guys. My big old head gets in the way. So I'm going to layer the doily, the vellum doily with that butterfly clip from Maya Road. That's one of my recent acquisitions. And I was looking for something to put on it. And so this banner from Ormolu that's left over from one of my previous kits is the perfect shade of red. It's just that tomatoey, slightly orange red. And here's the right shade as well, so I just cut this one out in case I decided to use that instead. But no, I don't like that nearly as much as I like the banner shape, so I'm going to stick with the banner shape. And that does a pretty good job of covering up most of the negative space from that ampersand, and it's not quite so distracting. I just wanted to show you that that's the double embossed dotted lace punch that I used. It's from EK Success. And now I'm going to write down some of my ingredients so that I don't forget to tell you what I used when I'm narrating. And I just used the back side of that as a kind of like a drop cloth for outlining around my papers. And I really want to outline on this particular layout because I'm using papers from a whole bunch of different lines. A lot of them are crepe paper, but the other thing about these papers is that a lot of them read as solids. So the background reads as a solid green or blue or whatever you want to call that color. This paper, even though it is a pattern paper, it reads as a solid red. And then the other papers read as solid beige and solid brown. And so I find that when you're combining a whole bunch of solids, I prefer the look of it, of them all being outlined, because it helps them to all come together. And the other thing that brings all of these papers together is the pattern paper with the robins on it, and that has the blue, it has the red, it has the beige, and it has brown. It has all those colors in it, and so that will unify this layout as well. But the outlining also unifies it. So anything that I can do to make to help these papers and elements look like they go together, I will be doing. So I'm just outlining the scallop, and now I'm going to outline the crepe paper from the pier. That's that beige paper with a slight chevron pattern on it. Love that paper. It's one of my favorites. I have my ringer off, but my phone keeps making noises anyways. Sorry about that. And now I'm finally going to commit. I thought about grabbing a piece of this paper where the birds were facing the other way. I like my animals to kind of face the inside, or characters or whatever it is, to face the inside of the layout instead of the outside. But the birds are facing in all different directions, and two of them are facing in and one of them is facing out. So I don't think it really matters that much. So I just stuck with the piece that I already had cut. I just trimmed it up a little bit so it wasn't sticking out anymore. Now I'm using a slick surface writer, which you could use a American Crafts slick writer, but what I use is a Stettler Lumocolor pen because those are my favorite markers ever, and I have a whole bunch of them. So I'm just taking my time as I outline this because it is very curvy, and so I find you need to find a balance between taking your time and going fast enough that your lines aren't too wobbly. And that's what that looks like once it's all finished. So now I'm just gluing some of these pieces down in the places that I had already decided they will be going. And I'm using my grid paper just to make sure that things are relatively straight. They don't need to be perfect, but I don't want them to be, very obviously off either. So this is pretty much where this is going to end up landing. So at the last minute, I thought maybe I need some more embellishments. So I went to my die cut drawer where I keep packages of die cuts that I have purchased before. And these are all crepe paper. Some of them are from DIY Shop, and some of them are from maybe On Trend, and some of them are from Maggie Holmes. And so I just put any potential ones, and I'm looking for some red, even though I'm not going to need it, but I'm looking for some red anyways. So I'm just going to shift where that doily is so that it's just looking better with the bird layered over top of it. So I'm going to glue it in place now. And then I'm just going to trim it up so that little pieces of vellum aren't showing. And now I'm going to use some pop dots to keep this bird from flattening out on my layout. And so, yeah, I put one kind of towards his beak and one down towards his tail so that he will be flat because he's layered on a piece of chipboard. So some of it was overhanging the chipboard. Just gluing the vellum doily that I kind of pulled out of the embossing folder, and gluing that down to the ampersand. And I'm trying to decide on these two guys here. I'm thinking maybe I want a title under there. I was gonna maybe put the title in one of those, but it would have to be so tiny that I don't know, I was just kind of trying to decide what I will do. So I'm going to pick out some letters. And this is my basket that I keep thickers in, and they're organized by color. There's a green wood grain that I thought I might use because it's green and it's wood grain, so it's perfect for a forest themed layout. But I'm not convinced that I want the title to be like that. So I picked out another orangey red font as well as some wood grain fonts. They're all thickers that I have picked out here. And I also have the Jelly Bean Soup letters that I got from a YouTuber who sent them to me. But I'm not going to use those. They're a little bit too bright for this layout. So here I am just looking and I'm realizing, oh, I don't have an E. I'd have to mix the big and the small and big letters in this set in order to get the word nature spelled, and I'm not really liking that. So I like that font, and what I really like about it is I like the darker color brown. This other brown wood grain is more of an orangey wood grain, and I really would have liked to have gone with the darker brown wood grain. And so as I'm taking out this lighter brown, I'm thinking, well, maybe I could ink over it or something to make it look a little bit darker. But once I got it on my layout, it actually looked okay, so I didn't end up doing that. I'm going to put these darker letters back on their sheet for another time. Put the sheet back away. And I'm going to fix up my title so that it fits on my piece of wax paper so that I can figure out where I'm going to put it. I'm pretty sure it's going to go here where I was going to put 2 frames, but now I'm not. And I'm going to write down what thickers I'm using. It's the Boardwalk thickers from, I think it's from the American Crafts collection. It coordinates with their Boardwalk collection. So now I'm looking through my tile letters, and these are what I use for subtitles or for smaller parts of my titles, and I can't decide between craft mini markets and the green mini markets, and I'm going to go back and pull out those red mini markets too. So I'm taking one more look through because I'm not convinced I want either of these tile letters, and I know I don't want shaped letters. I know I want tiles. So I pulled out that red. It's a little bit less orangey, but it's a pretty close match to the other reds on the layout. So I'm thinking about it, but no, I'm going to write you a note here, which I just didn't want to forget when I was narrating. So what I'm finding here is that the red is already balanced on this layout. So I don't need a red letter sticker. It's going to throw it off. And then I'm going to end up having to find more red to balance off where I put the title. And I'm not convinced that I want to add more embellishments to this layout, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. So I'm going to try this green, and I'm very tentative about this. As I'm spelling it out, I'm thinking, I'm not sure if I'm going to like this green because there's no other green that is this color on the layout other than in the picture. It does coordinate quite nicely, and it's called Pine. Pine and Cream is the name of the letter stickers by October Afternoon. So once they were placed, I decided I really loved them, and they really do bring some of the green out of the photos and into my layout, and I love that. So I couldn't have planned it better. And a lot of times the thing that I first think I'm not going to like ends up being the thing I love the most. So that's why it's a really good idea to just try some things anyways, even if you're not quite sure, because you can always change it. So I did some typing, as you saw. I just glued my piece of paper, my piece of pattern paper, onto a larger piece of paper and ran it through my typewriter so that I could get these little journaling strips. It says now that the kids are older, we can get back to hiking. And I'm going to spread these journaling strips throughout these two frames that are here. And so now that I know a better sense of what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually glue these down. So here I am just setting out these letters just the way that they were with the waxed paper, only they're up a tiny bit more, and I had to put the E so that it layered over that frame, but that's okay. I really like how that looks. And I'm just gonna kind of make sure that they're even, and I glued down the ampersand. I had to do a little bit of editing here just because my head was in the way. I'm going to staple these on with my tiny attacher. Ah, there's my head again. So it's shaping up the way that I would like it to look, so I'm pretty pleased with it at this point. I'm just going to add this bird to the frame with the doily under it, and I love the bird motif on this layout. It's just so pretty. That bird is gorgeous. I've been calling it a robin, but I don't actually think it's a robin. The robins around here are brown with a red breast, not blue. I think. I don't know. We have them all over the place, but I don't think they look quite like that. Anyhow, whatever kind of bird it is, it's really pretty. So I'm just figuring out where I'm going to place my journaling strips so that it's readable and also looks good. So keeping my phrases together is important. I don't want to spread them around too much so that you have to really search for the story that, it's not really story, but for the phrases that go along with this layout. And so I'm putting now that the kids are older all together right there, and then we can get back to hiking over by the bird. Used my roller date stamp to put the date, which was just this past weekend, so it's a fairly recent photo. I almost always am scrapping photos from the past 2 weeks or so, usually. Occasionally I'll pull out an old one. Now here's something I don't usually do, which is I want my splatters to land right around the ampersand and right around the bird's tail. And so I'm going to cover up the rest of my paper with just some scrap papers that I had laying around. They're just old sheets from my work. And I'm thinking about what color I'm going to use along with the gold. And I can't quite decide if I'm going to do like a golden brown. I definitely do not want to use white because there's a bird on this layout and I do not want it to look like bird poop. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing bird layouts, especially around the tail of a bird. Do not put white splatters. Unless if you're going for a bird poop look. Yeah, so I didn't get quite enough over there, so I just added a couple because again, this layout takes out a good part of the background paper it covers up, so I want to make sure that there's lots of splatters right on the very edge so that you can see them. So voila, that is what I am looking for, something that just has a couple of splatters, and some of those larger splatters will be covered, which is good. I didn't quite care for the larger gold splatters down by the bird, so I'm glad that the layout covers those up. Just checking my hands to make sure I don't have gold on them anywhere. I did dry my splatters with my heat gun, and they do dry quite quickly because it is pattern paper that I'm splattering on. I was going to use some stars, but I decided to use my little Lawn Fawn mixture of stars and asterisks here. And this is just how I store my wood veneers, in these clip together little cases that I get from Michael's in the scrapbooking storage supply area. And I just kind of sprinkled them, and then I moved them around with my hands afterwards just to make them fall in the places that would kind of complement where the mist already splattered. And I put them in groups of 3 over there, and then over here there's a little bit more than 3. So now this layout is complete, and I'm just going to show you the close-ups. I really love how this one turned out. And right, I was going to talk about my level of embellishment on this one. When I have a layout that has lots of busy photos like this photo of the trees and the waterfall really has a lot to take in, and then the other two have even more information in them. I don't like to put too much embellishment, so I kind of struggled with whether I would add more embellishment to those frames than just the pattern paper and the doily, but I ended up deciding to stick with minimal embellishment around this area of the layout because I've got my journaling, I've got my title, and then I've got the only real amount of embellishment that I have is right around that ampersand. That's where I've done a bit more embellishing. So that just kind of keeps the focus on the photos and on the title rather than it being too cluttered. So that's usually how I make my decision about whether I'm going to embellish a whole lot or just a little bit. I usually take the lead from my photos and I do the opposite. So if it's a bold photo with just a little bit to take in, like a headshot or something, I might do a lot of embellishment. But if it's a photo that has lots to take in, I will do minimal embellishment. So I hope you guys enjoyed this layout and have a happy National Scrapbooking Day. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.